Welcome, welcome, welcome. Actually, I'm going to say welcome, welcome, welcome another few times because my guest today, I forget how many times he said it on his YouTube channel, but he's done a bunch of welcomes just like me. So I was a big fan right away. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are talking politics and religion without killing each other. I'm your host, Corey Nathan. It's an honor to be a part of the Democracy Group, a network of podcasts that examines what's broken in our democracy and how we can work together to fix it. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us, review us. Remember the reviews. It all really helps in our Patreon program. We have links in the show notes to make all of this stuff easy to find. And it helps so we can continue having great conversations like the one we're having today with Marcus Ruiz Evans. Marc Evans has been spearheading efforts involved in making California an independent country at least as far back as 2012 when his book California's Next Century 2.0 was published. And on January 23rd of this year, just a couple of weeks ago as we record this, the Secretary of State, Dr. Shirley Weber, here in California, announced that the proponent of a new initiative was cleared to begin collecting petition signatures. So now the proponent is our guest, Marc Evans. So now we're off to the races. But before we get into all of that, Marc, thanks so much for joining us. How you doing?
Great, great. Thank you for this opportunity.
Absolutely, absolutely. I thought a good way to start is to learn a little bit more about your background. I was fascinated so you grew up here in California?
Born and raised.
Oh, how about that?
I never would have existed if it wasn't for the California culture. My mom, I'm actually Tejano. Those are the Mexicans in southern Texas that were taken over and forced to become part of Texas and then had all the rights stripped away and were forced to become American citizens against their own will. My abuelita, that means grandmother, told me about, what it meant to be Tejano. So my very upbringing is American imperialism and the destruction of rights and territory. And I grew up with that. Then my mother left Texas in the 70s because Texas treats Mexican people like dogs. And she and my tias, my aunts, moved, and my grandma, abuelita, to California so they could be treated as equally. Within 10 to 15 years, they were all the most powerful Latinas at a bunch of Fortune 500 companies. So they went from disrespect and can't really get a job to Fortune 500 vice presidents, all of them, just because they were actually treated fairly and they were going to get a fair shot. I literally wouldn't exist if my mom didn't leave Texas for racism to come to California. I never would have been born, so I'm aware of that. Born and raised Fresno, California, only attended California schools, went to the University of Southern California. I was a Dean's Scholar. Only 1% to 2% of the student body qualifies for that. I qualified into the master's program in planning, which was the #1 planning school in all of America, and only 1% qualified. And I graduated, I believe, magna cum laude. Then I went to go work for the California government, the freeway department. They have absolutely nothing to do with this. And with them, I was able to work in Sacramento for 4 years, the Bay Area for 4 years, and LA for about 4 years. And then I'm back in Fresno. Been here about 7 years. So I've lived literally in every major metro area. I've worked for the state of California, got my college education from California, got my public education from California, and my existence literally would not have happened if California didn't have the ethos that it has had since the 1945 era.
So clearly you love the Golden State. You have it,
I wouldn't exist without it.
In your bones.
I'm not infatuated with this place. We got problems.
Sure.
But it's like a family, Do you kick out your family because you're upset about one or two things, or do you realize, wow, I got a loving family and they really take care of me and provide a home, and I can get over the fact that sometimes grandpa snores late at night at 12. That's my opinion of California.
Yeah, yeah. Did you discover your interest in politics and legislative affairs in undergrad, or were you interested even before then?
My mom got me a subscription to Foreign Affairs magazine at age 18. I'm the only 18-year-old I've ever met who asked for a subscription to Foreign Affairs magazine. It's a foreign policy magazine. I was reading graduate level textbooks on organizational dynamics for fun in 10th grade in high school. I was kind of a big dork, big nerd, huge Star Trek fan. Star Wars is nowhere near as good as Star Trek. We don't need to get into that. I don't need to get into that. Okay. I don't want to
I
Make it
didn't
look
think you were going to
nice
get
and motorcycle.
controversial, man. Come
I
on,
didn't want to
Star
make
Trek.
motorbike. No, let's just talk about secession and the breakup of America. Nothing controversial like Star Wars, Star Trek. Okay, I think that's fair. We agreed to that earlier. I expect you to keep your part of the agreement. So, yeah, I was a big dork. My friends in high school were an Asian guy, a black guy, and a white guy who was 15th in line to be the king of Sweden. That means nothing when you're 15th. Yeah, I mean, and the reason we all hung out was because we all like Star Trek.
Mm.
So if you like Star Trek, you were in the squad, and if you didn't, I didn't hang out with you or have much to do with you. Most of my friends were Asian. We spent a lot of time doing nerd stuff. When I went to USC, I actually joined an Asian fraternity. It was called Alpha Kappa Psi. It was a business fraternity, but when I joined, it turned 65% demographically Asian. I then went and started two more chapters, which were majority Asian people at the University of California, Riverside and University of California, Los Angeles. And so I'm considered a godfather of Asian fraternities by a few people. So I also then wrote a book on California diversity in 2012, which is the book that started CalExit.
Yeah.
Originally, it was just talking about how we're the most diverse place in the world, and that makes us awesome and uniquely pivoted to basically direct global politics for the next 20 years. I was comparing it to Switzerland. We can go into that if you want, but we've moved on from that to
Well,
CalExit.
I was curious, and you've touched upon a little bit of this already, but your background seems to lend itself to understanding not just California's special place within the United States, but also its special place in the world. So, if you could take us, go a little bit deeper on some of the education and your professional trajectory that gave you such a unique insight into all this.
Well, I think it started in Sacramento. Um, so I was in Sacramento, and every year there's so much federal money coming, and then the state has to figure out how they're going to fund all the transportation projects with a combination of state funds, local funds, and federal funds. So it's a big color of money pot, is what they call it.
Yeah.
What colors your money? And every year they'd laugh and go, "We're still 100 billion short. I guess those people are going to die on that roadway on 119, or I guess the bridge over 120 is going to collapse. Whoops! Hope you don't get killed." And I thought that was really morbid. And the
Yeah.
first year I didn't say anything, but the second year I go, "Why are we laughing about people dying
Mm.
from lack of transportation funds?" And they go, "We shouldn't. It's a morbid joke. It's how we deal with the fact that we know we are missing about $100 billion that we have of our own money that we could use for ourselves, but we're not allowed to. And because of that, these people were aware that people were going to die. So you don't fix certain transportation problems, people die straight up, or they get maimed, heads removed, legs removed. I'm not trying to be morbid, but there's something called SWITTers, which is a secret program run by the CHP that basically talks about all the maimings on the freeway report. So
Wow.
there's about a 9/11 a year in California alone. So about as many people as died in the 9/11 terrorist attack die on California roads every year, just as a normal course of business.
Wow.
And so you want to reduce that number as much as possible. But in Sacramento, every year they had to find out California is a donor state. We get about 75 cents for every dollar we send. That 25 cents goes to 35 other states who have roads and dams and seaports and airports and levees ranked higher than ours by the federal government.
Mm.
So we pay for people who are already doing better than us to continue to do better than us. We've done that since the late 80s, early 90s, or about 45 years or half a century. Most people in California say they remember the famed Golden State era ending in the late 80s, early 90s. That's when our donor state payment era started. I don't find that a coincidence. And so I was educated to this morbid joke where it's people trying to get over the fact that they know damn well people are going to die because we don't get to spend our money on ourselves. The levees over Sacramento are the worst in all of America. They're as bad as the ones over New Orleans before Katrina. Homeland Security's none about that. They've done absolutely nothing. After 9/11, the most terrorist open or unsecured spot in all of America was California. And yet we only got a 50th of the 9/11 protection funds. And Senator Dianne Feinstein had to ask, if we're the most likely to be struck, how come we aren't getting the majority of the funds? And it took her 5 years to actually argue for the federal government to get us the funds. So, when it comes to getting blown up by nukes, by terrorists, even then, we didn't get any help. You look at homelessness, everybody blames us for homelessness. And I'm like, homelessness didn't exist. It's not new. This has been a problem recognized since the 1970s. There's a federal program called the McKinney-Vento Federal Homeless Assistance Fund. It's broken up to general, veterans, and children. When we had 50% of the homelessness of America, we got 11% of the funds.
Mm.
Why are we getting 11% of the national funds when we have half of the national problem? On top of the fact we're already a donor state and pay more into the system than we get for 45 years.
What's the reasoning behind something like that? That seems imbalanced.
So the federal government used to produce a report where they showed how much each state was a donor state and how much they were giving extra and which states were feasting off the quote federal trough. Governor Schwarzenegger, when he was governor around 2010, called out the fact, and he was the first governor to do this, that we were a donor state. In response, Senators Dianne Feinstein and Barbara Boxer went on television and said that he was lying when actually they were lying. And the newspaper reported how strange it is to have sitting senators attack a sitting governor. Schwarzenegger was telling the truth. Our two senators were not. After Schwarzenegger did that, the federal government stopped releasing that report for the first time in 20 years, and they've never gone back to publishing it again.
Mm.
That's all I know. You can ask them, why'd you stop producing that report the moment the governor made a comment about it? And who told those two senators to lie to the California public and attack a sitting governor? I don't have the answers to those, but someone made those decisions. Those are
Right.
facts.
Right. Well, we'll definitely get into the reality that California is a donor state when we
Sure.
get into the initiative a little bit. But I thought it would be helpful if we got into some of the historic understanding, because you really
Sure.
have a terrific historic context, not just of
Thank
prior
you.
secession efforts in this state, but on the part of other states, whether it be Texas or other states, but also other countries. Like I heard you talk about Scotland's efforts over 100 plus years. Can you give us a little bit of that historical context?
Well, I'm going to drop a bomb on you real quick. We're not pushing this because it's a little bit difficult, but it is true that California was an independent country like Texas for 10 years. Most Californians don't know that. They don't teach that in California schools. They don't teach it in California colleges. Even famous UC Berkeley doesn't teach this. So in 1836, the group called Californios, which were the people here, pushed out the Mexican governor. Mexico City sent a governor here, said, I'm going to be in control. Californians went with guns and said, get the hell out. We're not taking orders from you. Mexico again tried it in 1846, and a bunch of Californians again met him at the border and said, get the hell out. I think one was Pico Rivera and the other was Micho Tarena. So when you look at it that way, America hadn't conquered California yet, and we were basically de facto independent from Mexico. So we were an independent nation for 10 years. Texas talks about how they're an independent nation for 10 years all the time. It's a big source of their identity. We literally had the same achievement, and almost no one in California knows about it. And I
Mm.
don't find that an accident. I find it highly bizarre that liberals at UC Berkeley and other schools won't admit that this story has. But going to the history now, Scotland is the marquee example for secession or independence, or what you call devolution is the term. De-evolved government, meaning less linkages with the host government or the federal government in our case. Most secessionists around the world look at Scotland because they did it legally and peacefully. For about 90 years, secession in Scotland was a joke, just laughed at. Then all of a sudden, this guy named Alex Salmon shows up and he starts cracking heads. He's like, we're going to wear suits. We're not wearing kilts. We're not getting drunk. We're going to have speeches. We're going to dress like politicians running for office. We're not going to be insulting the English. We're going to talk about a loss of economics. Within 5 years of him doing that, they had a vote.
Mm.
So 90 years of joke. One guy comes in and says, we're going to take this seriously like a corporation. 5 to 7 years, they have a vote. He and other historians of Scottish independence say that you can date the day that Scotland was going to become devolved from England to the day that Scotland released the Coleman Commission report. All that was is the Scottish people ordered the government of Scotland to do an official investigation on if they could be independent from England for the first time in 500 years.
Mm.
Not everybody believed in Scottish independence after that report came out. Other people thought the report was garbage. Other people thought they had it wrong. But now everybody was talking about it in a serious manner. There was no more laughter, and even the critics of Scotland had to take it damn serious.
Hmm.
Historians pointed to that moment. It basically broke the Scottish mind that their official government did an official report on could we be independent. And That basically they were voting within a few years from there, and they never walked back. Historians stage to that. We could have a similar epiphany here in California with a blue ribbon panel investigation. Exact same concept. All it is an official California government investigation. California does these 2 or 3 times a year. Early childhood education, daycare for elderly. They go, okay, there's a problem. Maybe people are being hurt. Nail salons was a famous one. Some women were getting sick, so they came up with health standards for nail salons. So you interview all the nail salon owners. You interview the business climates. You interview people who get nails done. You interview doctors and bacteriologists and whoever. And you put it together and report after about 9 months of research and you say, here's the problem. And here's a recommended solution. They do this all the time. Typically, the legislature takes the recommended solution. They don't have to. All we're doing is taking this normal process that can be called on by any single assembly member or any single sitting senator, with the addition of 5 assembly members or senators backing them up. It's really easy to make this happen, is to call that investigation. And this is why we tell people, we're not just telling you to sign the petition. Sign, petition, make
Right.
phone call 30 seconds later. If you don't want to wait till 2028 for the petition to play out, you can literally call your legislator and demand the things the petition does today. As
Right.
we've been saying, CalExit could happen next month if you want it. The only reason we're doing the petition is it forces the California government to do what we want to over than kicking and screaming. If the California government was calling for the initiative blue ribbon panel tomorrow, we'd be starting this investigation within days or weeks.
So
Anyone
I
can call for it, any 5 can back it up.
Yeah, yeah. So I do want to get into the mechanics of the steps and what what this is actually calling for and the
Yeah,
alternatives. So,
yeah,
but I would like to take a look at there have been other CalExit initiatives even
sure.
in recent history. So what is different about this moment? I could tell you, I was evacuated last week. Friends of mine
Oh,
lost their houses, so it is
oh.
very real and very present for me. But I'd like rather than me like blathering on about Donald
Well,
Trump and his shenanigans over these last
well,
few weeks.
well, can I ask you a question because
Sure.
I'm a Californian and I care and I was down in LA and it looks horrible but I wasn't an LA resident. Um, when people are dead and there's bodies on the ground and there's people homeless and there's people beside themselves and there's people literally coming apart with their sanity because they've lost everything, I mean, reduced to ash. And there's all these people and they're in a horrible situation, a disaster, worst possible point in their life. And then the president comes on TV and says, I don't really know if I want to help out with assistance because it turns out I don't really like you guys this whole time. Or maybe I'm going to strong arm you to make you do what I want and hold disaster assistance. So grandpa's having a heart attack, is about ready to go into coronary arrest. And that's when you walk in the room and go, Gramps, I never really was a big fan of you. I don't know if I'm going to drive you to the hospital. Let me
Yeah.
think about it. What kind of human being does that at that moment? It's a
I,
sociopath.
it's
It's a
someone
sociopath.
without a
It's not,
soul.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
and,
So,
and the tragic part of it is that he's setting an example. I have friends that have graduated. So I grew up on the East Coast and graduated from high school in New Jersey. I had friends who've never left the state of New Jersey who that hour at 10 o'clock in the morning, the fires were still burning. People didn't were losing their homes and then all of a sudden some schmuck from Manalapan, New Jersey, Central Jersey became an instant expert in California fire policy and was calling it all these kinds of pejoratives. So it's not just the president. He's setting an example that a lot of other people around the country, people that just 6 months ago, I was back in Jersey having a drink with this guy, having a beer with this guy. And I said, Sean, have you not just lost your mind, but have you lost your soul? My pastor at my church down in Pasadena lost his entire home. His family, I was just bringing down a pair of pants. We happen to have the same size pants. Just 2 days ago, I brought down a few pairs of pants for him to get by. And this guy in freaking Jersey, who's never visited California once in his life, is an expert and saying, oh, all the pejoratives of our governor and of Mayor Bass. And, just save it, dude. Just save it. Where's your humanity, for God's sake? So, yeah, I'm not being the interviewer right now. I'm a little bit of,
I was just going to say the tables have turned. Who's interviewing who? You sound like a California nationalist now, sir. Of course, I wouldn't call you that, but literally what you're saying is what we're saying. So I've gotten hundreds of calls from people of late. And I just ask them a simple question. Is a country where a president does that in that situation a stable country? So let's picture England. Leeds is where the Beatles came from. Let's say there was a tsunami. And London goes, I know you speak English and I know you're part of England and we've been together for 500 years, but I don't know if I want to help. Why don't you just have those bloated bodies float around in the bay for a couple days and maybe I'll get to you? Is that a stable country where that happens? Does anyone with a rational brain thinks, yeah, that's a sign of stability of a Western order? Anybody
Yeah,
at all think that? No,
no.
no one at all. So,
Someone wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago that really resonated with me, and the a healthy country can ask a hard question, such
sure,
as what went wrong at the right
sure.
time and in the right place. But while the fires are still burning, not to ask that question, but to ask the question, who's to blame, and let's go on the attack while the fires are still burning. That's not a healthy country. So
Well, he said, I'm not sure I want to help when we're at our worst. That's disgusting.
yeah,
That's not how you treat fellow countrymen. No professor, nobody that I've talked to says, yeah, that's a sign of a stable country where countrymen treat other countrymen that way. And then I go, is it a coincidence that Mike Johnson said the same thing?
no,
If you look at the levels of power, it goes president, vice president, speaker of the House. So two of the three most powerful people said, I don't know if I want to help you, California, when you're at your worst.
yeah.
And then we ask people, do you remember that survey from LA Times last year? It wasn't even a year ago, it was only 6 months ago. 48% of Republicans view Californians as not American. And so I ask people, half of the party says, you're not American. I don't view you as fellow countrymen. And then the president they elect treats us like not fellow countrymen. Is this really a coincidence, or did they tell you what they're going to do before and you just didn't want to believe it?
Mm, yeah. So
Time to wake up, California. They're advertising what's coming,
so
right? They've already told us.
you have a new book coming out, Talking to Giants on the Deck of the Titanic. And you also you've hosted a number of debates on your YouTube channel. So it sounds like you have heard a wide range of perspectives on this possibility of a state as significant as California seceding from the Union. What have been some of the academic, economic, and political arguments against secession that you've heard?
I've heard a lot. Most of them are based on ignorance and a lack of understanding of the law and the basics, and that's all of them basically. So, secession's illegal. You can't do it. If you leave, it'll be an automatic civil war. If you leave, trade walls will go up. We'll put some sort of North Korea, Northern Ireland style wall between America and California. Nobody will go back and forth. Trade will end. You can't see your relatives. It'll be like East Germany, West Germany. China and Russia will automatically invade and take you over. America will reconquer you or nuke you if you leave, and it will just cause a civil war. Those are the main arguments, and all of them are wrong and based on ignorance. And basically, the people making it, I've had to educate them about the facts, and that includes a variety of professors. I've literally had to educate a couple lawyers on the law.
Mhm.
Not saying that lightly. Lawyers are great. We need lawyers for things, but when lawyers jump into politics, and they assume they know what they're talking about when they haven't read the cases, then they begin to say ignorant things that aren't actually based upon the law. For example, we have two articles out in California right now. You can't secede. Experts investigate it. Is it legal to secede? Experts are asked. None of them mention Texas versus White. None of them mention consent of the states is in Texas versus White. None of them mention Salmon Chase, who was personally appointed by Abraham Lincoln, oversaw Texas versus White. None of them mention that we live in a system called stare decisis or case law, which means it doesn't matter what your opinion is. It matters what court has ruled on that subject beforehand. Since there is only one case on secession called Texas versus White, you must reference that and don't have the ability to just ignore it, like some lawyers have tried to do. Additionally, none of those articles mentioned Erwin Chemerinsky, the top constitutional scholar in California, most cited legal expert in all of America, also wrote a book last year suggesting maybe California would need to leave America, by the way. And he said in 2017, when asked about CalExit, a simple majority vote of Congress could be all that's required.
So not the two-thirds constitutional amendment.
They're lying. They are lying. They're
That's
lying. They're
interesting.
lying. They're lying. Lawyers are coming on TV and lying. Texas versus White says consent of the states. It does not say amendment. The amendment process was known for a full century before that case was decided. There's also known as something called the plain speaking rule in American law. So I want to have a regulation on furry animals. So that means cats and dogs. No, I meant dogs the whole time and not cats. You can't do that. That's why the law is really specific. You
Yeah.
have to be specific. So if you meant amendment, why did you not say amendment when the amendment process was known for a full century before? You didn't use that word. You said consent.
Okay.
Secondly, the only people who can define what consent means is the Supreme Court according to the Constitution, not some lawyer on TV. So that's his opinion. That's not the law. And secondly, they won't mention Erwin Chemerinsky and a simple majority vote. So I see people say it's illegal, and they go, look at this. I saw this California constitutional lawyer said this. I saw this other expert of law said you can't do this. And I go, why is Texas versus White not mentioned? Why is consent to the states not mentioned? Why is Salmon Chase not mentioned? And why is Erwin Chemerinsky and majority vote of Congress not mentioned? They completely omit that stuff. I've done 35 interviews on this. I've mentioned it every single interview.
Hmm.
It is impossible that if you watched anything I've said, you would miss that. And yet these two articles completely omit all of that. Don't interview me and then say it's illegal.
Right. Right.
So yeah, yeah, of
So
course.
I do want to get to the process,
Sure.
but one objection that I've heard just in, I haven't conducted a whole bunch of interviews about this. This is just talking with my dear old dad. Ah, that's crazy. Well, why is
Sure.
it crazy, Pops?
Hit
And
me.
he's a pretty well-informed guy.
Yeah.
And he said, well, for one thing, there are a ton of military bases here.
Mhm.
So in terms of fast forward, not to get ahead of our skis here, but fast forward, let's say all this stuff happens, the logistics of how would California separate when we have, when we have just up by me, up in Lancaster, we have an Air Force base, we have a Navy base down near San Diego. I mean, how would that all work?
So in the 1990s, there was a thing called the end of the Cold War under President Clinton, and they did something called BRAC, or Base Realignment and Closure. It was the largest movement, transmigration, and closing of military bases since the 1950s. It was peaceful. Many military bases were shut down, and many were transferred to other states. Nothing bad happened, totally peaceful. They did it in 5 years. That's at the scale that you're talking about. We've already done it. When I hear people say that, they're completely unaware of BRAC and the fact that we already did it.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, like I said, maybe I didn't say it, but I was thinking it. I know this sounds like an ignorant question. I'll blame it on my dad. It's my dad's
Well, I'm
ignorant
just saying
question.
this is the thing. There's a lot of people who are well educated and then they go, this is a good question. And I go, what about X? Oh, I wasn't even aware of that. Maybe
Right.
it's not a good question. If you're
So
not
there is
aware of it on the fact,
precedent.
yeah,
It can be done. There is precedent for this.
already did it.
Yeah.
Already did it on a large scale. I mean, we went from a 1945 global Cold War footing to a post-global Cold War footing. It was the massive, most largest reduction in force and transfer of things ever, basically since the Civil War. And it
Hmm.
was completely peaceful and was done in a few years. It's called BRAC. It's online. BRAC. Base Realignment and Closure, President Clinton.
So now take us through the process. So how does
Sure.
one first of all, I was curious when I saw the announcement from the Secretary of State's office, how does one even get to the point where the Secretary of State clears the initiative to start collecting signatures? And now you got to get the signatures and gets on the ballot, but only as a blue ribbon committee. Like take us through the process and then the alternatives, which you've already introduced. But take us through all that.
So we refiled the petition we had filed in 2018. We did that so that it would be accepted. So once we had a previous version accepted, we refiled that and just changed the dates so that if anybody in the California government wanted to reject that, we could sue because we could say you approved one that's basically identical. So this is just basically a rehash of something that's been public record for a couple of years. It's based upon earlier versions of CalExit. Anybody can file the initiative. Anybody could file this initiative. It's public record. Anybody could refile my initiative and put their name on it and put it up tomorrow. You don't need me. Any California resident who's an American citizen can file an initiative in California for $2,000. You could literally take the text that I put public record, slap your name on it, and file it. Boom, 2.5 months later, you'd be given permission to collect signatures. Anyone could do it. You don't need me. Public record, we just refiled something already there to prove that point that anyone could do it. 2.5 months to approve it. I filed it the night that Trump got elected. I was really emotional and angry. That's why it's called A2 because I had to do 2 rounds of amendments to get the dates right. I was mad. So I went after it, and then we got the paperwork right and it's sorted out. And they were great. They asked a lot of tough questions, but they were great. Um, you collect the signatures. We got permission to collect the signatures about 2 weeks ago. We have about 5.5 months to collect 600,000 signatures. Once we've collected all of those, we then go to a vote in 2026. There's an
Okay.
election in 2026. In 2026, the question will be put up to the voters. Do you want um, a plebiscite question to be placed on the 2028 ballot, asking, do you want to be independent from America? So
Let me just clarify something you said a second ago. Now, you said about 600,000 signatures. A couple of the reports I read mentioned a different number. I forget if it was 450,000 or 550,000. But are you shooting for
great.
more because you're expecting there to be curing the petition or something? Or
I thought it was 600,000. If it's 450,000, that just made it a third, 30% more likely. So that's
okay.
great news. Awesome. Thanks, man.
Yeah, it was. I'll send you the exact number that I saw, but I think it was 446,000 or something like
Great.
that. Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah.
You do want to go over because when you're doing something of the scale, a lot of times what happens is they have to make sure that the address of the person who signs matches the address they listed when they registered to vote. A
Okay,
lot of times that's where you get the mistake, or they didn't actually sign their name. If the wedding signature isn't there and the address doesn't match, that person's vote or signature is removed and not counted, and that's the biggest thing. Typically, you want to do about 5 to 7% more than required so that you can meet the I think it's called the thresher is the term, meaning that it
okay.
spits out bad votes. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, and we will put the link to because you can print out this petition yourself, sign
yep,
it yourself,
yep,
and it
yep.
sounds like you've already been getting some signed petitions back already, right?
So we've emailed about 27,000 people a link to the petition. You have to download it on your own and print it on your own. Most people can't print 11 by 17. They got to go to a printer to do it. Unfortunately, that's the way this has to be done according to California law. Everybody we've told, send it to your county registrar. So we have one page that has instructions on how to fill out the petition and a link to download it, training videos, meetings in the future, places you can pick up petitions. That's available for everybody, and that's the link we send. I think about 25,000 people have that. And from what I can tell, the messages I'm getting is they're going to printers and printing it off and turning it in right away.
So, okay. So let's say we get the 450,000 signatures or let's 600,000 signatures. Then it goes to the 2026 on the ballot in 2026, and I think it's 55% hurdle.
Yeah.
Okay, so 55% hurdle. But you're saying that there's an alternative that I can simply call Pilar Schiavo, my assembly member, or Suzette Valladares, our state senator, and encourage them to get 5 of their colleagues, you said? And initiate the blue ribbon committee that all of this other work is actually forcing them to do, right?
And they could place the question in a non-legally binding manner in a future election. The initiative
Mm,
is not important. The initiative is not important. The initiative is not important. It's what it makes you do. It
okay.
compels the California government, if they're kicking and screaming, um, to do the blue ribbon panel investigation and to place a non-legally binding question in a future election saying, do you want to leave America or should California be independent from America? Because it's not legally binding, it doesn't have, we can basically use the initiative process to do it. While it's not domestically legally binding, it's considered a international legal precedent. You basically have a vote on what's known as an international plebiscite. So you have the government do an investigation, they release a report to the public. The public reads that. The public now takes a vote. The vote says we want to become independent. That has enormous weight internationally because what happens is you have an educated electorate. The
Mm,
government educated the electorate, and then that educated electorate took the vote. It was witnessed on the international stage. You're basically ready for the final step. The California government can call a blue ribbon panel investigation. Any single assembly member or single senator can call for it. It typically takes 4 to 5 to back it up to make it happen. And any single assembly member or senator can call for a non-legally binding vote, plebiscite question, to be placed on the next election or in a special election.
Okay.
Anyone in the assembly or the governor can call for a special election. The way this plays out is we're going to collect signatures. There's an election in 2026. Voters say yes in 2026. That automatically starts the blue ribbon panel and automatically places the vote in 2028. If you want to skip all of that, you sign the petition and then you call your assemblyman. I want you to do a blue ribbon panel on CalExit, period, and I want it now. I'm a voter and I'm concerned. I want you to do a non-legally binding vote on if California should be independent from America at the next election, or I'm so upset I want you to call a special election. And if you have any questions on how to do that, assembly member, senator, governor, there's a petition on Shirley Weber's website that walks you through every single step. It's called the CalExit petition. You may have heard about it in the news.
Hmm. Now, just so I'm clear, what does the fast forward to the blue ribbon panel investigation? What does that do?
It's our Common Commission. It will be a 9-month investigation of professors, experts, activists, sociologists, regular Californians, maybe newscasters, anybody tied to it, anybody who can speak on it. We already made a list of about 57 experts who've already spoken on CalExit in 2016 to 2020 that could be called, but it wouldn't be up to us. They would do that investigation. You'd have televised hearings in the Sacramento Capitol. Picture this, right? World's fifth largest economy's government officially investigating secession. Pictures in the Capitol, and there's people talk. They didn't even sign on secession. We don't even know what the report's going to say. Maybe it says it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
But the TV shows world's fifth largest economy, government officially investigating secession, and there's pictures of people talking about secession in the California Capitol on television. You haven't had anything that impactful happen since 1865.
Right.
That's going to be shockwaves all on its own.
Right. So we've already talked about some of the reasons why Californians would want to do this, including the fact that we're a donor state. We talked about recent incidents, such as, the current occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania's reaction to when our houses were burning.
Let you
And
die and treat you like foreigners. Was
right.
your first point. Yeah.
So there are some very pressing arguments in favor of, but if we get to the point, and this sounds like it's years down the road, but there's currently 53 Republican senators, and senators of those states that are basically living on California's dime right now, right?
Yeah.
What would be compelling arguments in those states to get even the 50% plus one consent, let alone the notion that I was under the impression of that it requires an amendment with with a
There's
two-thirds
no
vote.
basis for that in the law anywhere.
So
No
let's say it's
basis for
even
that in
just
the law at
50,
all. Yeah.
50.1%
So
of Congress.
we would be the one state. So once we vote, when we send a representative, we only need 25 states. So yeah, so because we'd be the 26th and that's a simple majority, we only need 25 states. So
Okay,
we have about 35 to 43 conservative states who hate our guts for who we
right.
are. We only need about half of them. The Republican Party is the most powerful they've been in a century. So a lot of people recognize that trifecta governments come and go. I've heard some liberals say, oh, Trump's got a trifecta government, whatever. W. Bush had one. Sure. But you got to go back about 100 years to find out when the Republicans had the Senate, House, presidency, and the Supreme Court. That
Mm.
fourth pillar makes it historical. We're looking at, they haven't had this kind of control for a century or more. So it's highly unique, and they have all the power they need to vote us out without any Democrats backing it. Now, to get at your central question, the fact that we're a donor state and they are dependent upon us, do they know that? And have you ever heard of the term political suicide and painting yourself in a corner?
So that was my working theory is that they would look immediately at the possibility of kicking California out so that the remaining United States has a super red majority, right? Not thinking for a second that they are living on the living on the California dole, baby. Like, so they'd have to worry about that later. Break it first and worry about the rest of it
Yeah.
later.
So this is what I tell people. I go, well, don't they know that? I mean, and maybe they say that, but they don't really mean it. So I've said California's horrible for business. Liberals can't do business. Us Republicans know business. Republican states are better at business. All these undocumented immigrants is a drain on the federal system. All these forest fires is a drain on the federal system. Any bad idea that California does is a drain on the system, and they're horrible for business. I've said that for 50 years.
Mm.
Now I'm going to go, actually, what I meant, guys, and this is all of us in the party, including me, Trump, and everything we've said for decades, including Reagan, was a total lie. California's great for business. They're better than us Republicans at business. In fact, we need them because we suck at business compared to them. And actually, we don't actually defend undocumented immigrants or anything. They support us and our bad ideas. That's political suicide. You'd have to say everything we told you for the last 50 years, all of our philosophy, all of our methodology was completely wrong, and it was the total opposite of that. Turns out California is great for business. Their heads will explode. This is called painting yourself into a corner and political suicide. If you said, I love apples for 50 years, you can't then one day go, actually, I'm disgusted with apples. I've loved oranges this whole time. Okay, but now you've lost all credibility in your following belief. Secondly, the Republicans literally had a conference in Congress when Trump was president, where they said they subsidize California. So they've had official proceedings in Congress, in power, where they've said the total opposite of the truth and printed it as a fact.
Mm.
So they don't know what you're talking about. They literally officially say the opposite. They painted themselves in a corner and they can't undo it without literally obliterating the party. And any politician who walks that back, their career's done forever. So whoever says, hey, we can't let California go, plan on never being elected for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, this is really, really informative. Oh,
Thank
so
you.
okay, so let's fast forward. Let's say this thing goes through. California's a sovereign nation, right?
He's going to go through. Yeah,
So does that mean that ultimately means me as a California resident, I'm probably paying higher state or California taxes, but my overall taxes would go down because I'm
you
not
got
paying
it.
federal taxes, right?
You got it. Yeah. We're
Where
we're
do I
we're talking,
sign?
yeah. So we're talking about your, if you take your federal and state income taxes, we could basically wipe out your state income taxes and afford everything we need with just your federal income taxes. So when we
Hmm.
tell people, how would you like to never pay state income taxes again? They say, that sounds cool. When we tell businesses, how would you like to never pay business income taxes for the state ever again? They say that would be a boom for business. When we tell businesses, would 50% less regulatory overhead also help your business? Because we're getting rid of all federal regulations now. So now you only have California regulations to deal with, and you don't pay income tax. They all say that would be a giant boom for business, and businesses would be coming back to California.
Hmm.
So economic boom.
Yeah, yeah, I could
That's what
see
we're looking
that.
at.
Very, very exciting prospects here. Interesting prospects, even for, constitutional nerds and legislative nerds. It's interesting to
Fully
really
legal. There's no
go.
basis for it has to be the amendment. I challenge any lawyer, show me with a court case where it said that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So I want to ask you a couple of wrap-up questions. These are
Yeah.
more about the show and what the show is all about. I call it TP&R question. Talk of politics and religion without killing each other. What do you think each of us can do to be able to share space with, have better conversations with, perhaps even nurture relationships with people across our differences? So that's people who have different backgrounds and beliefs than we do, who get their, and as you said, California is the most diverse state, who get their news from different sources than we do. How can we do better talk of politics and religion without killing each other? Or is it even possible?
I'll tell you what I found. So I interviewed 200 professors from universities in the Midwest, the South, Northeast, East Coast, Ivy Leagues, West Coast, California, etc., and a couple out of Scotland, England, and Australia. Very few. And these were all, everybody who had ever published on political division in the last 10 years. I basically either got an email comment from them or interviewed them on video. All of them have different solutions to fix political polarization. There is no consensus on what causes it, and there is no consensus, therefore, on the solution amongst the entire academic field. There's maybe 5 ideas on what causes it and maybe 10 to 15 solutions without any unified belief system, and they will attack each other's solutions. And when you ask them about all of them, I said, okay, so we implement your solution. Congress listens to you. I would say, here's a pen. This is a magic wand, right? I'm giving it to you. You have the ability to make Congress do whatever you want and the American people do whatever you want. And everybody says, we're going to implement your solution. You can guarantee me that it will fix America. Every single professor did this. I hope. I hope it does. I'm sorry, 200 experts on political science, the most critical mind thinkers who are looking into this, and all of you say, I hope? That does not imbue confidence. That's what I found. If we're looking at the solutions, some people say social media, right? But the problem with that is that the most politically divided are the elderly, and they're the least likely on social media. So that's a hole in
Mm,
that theory. Some people say primaries, removing primaries, but actually, you've had some places do that, and it did not make it less polarized. Some people said multivariate elections, and same thing. There's examples where that did not reduce polarization. The one that seems to be the biggest, most likely theory to me from all of them is not the rise of the internet. It's not Donald Trump. It's not demographic shifts. It's not the labor market changing. It's something called the big sort. If you look
mhm.
up the concept of the big sort, it's basically this idea that Americans have been moving into like-minded communities since the 1990s.
Yeah.
And if you
Robert
look at what,
Putnam wrote about that in Bowling
yeah,
Alone. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, and I believe Putnam,
He might have had the follow-up book. I might be wrong about
yeah,
this, but you're right. The big sort is where folks go to communities, go to states where it's going to be more and more like them. That's why we're finding redder
yep,
states or
yep,
bluer
yep,
cities.
yep, yep.
Yeah. So
Yeah, so if you look
yeah.
at what's known as landslide
Okay.
election counties, 538's covered this, Washington Post, New York Times. You go back to the 1990s. Most of America was a gray. It wasn't blue or red, meaning if you're a Democrat or Republican, you had a fair chance of winning there. It depended on what you were saying, where what people were like, a real election. Then there were landslide election counties where if it's a Republican landslide election county, Republicans win by 20 percentage points over any Democrat in that county in any election ever. If it's a
Mm,
Democrat landslide election county, Democrats win by 20 percentage points. At that level, what that does is tell the other party, don't even bother trying. Like, just give up. You're never going to get close. 20 percentage points means you're knocked out. If you look at maps, you can see where we go from about a third of the country's landslide election counties, blue and red in the 1990s, to 85% recently. So we went from a third with two-thirds not landslide election counties to now roughly 80% of the country's landslide election counties.
right.
That happened over a 35-year period of people moving, people gradually adjusting to their new communities, people becoming more quiet if they found the community became more conservative or leaving to go to a conservative or liberal community. I don't think you undo polarization without undoing that 30-year shift. And when I've asked professors who are well aware of the big sort, I go, we could do this in the next 5 years, right? And they go, no, this is a generational project, meaning it happens with your kids and your grandkids actually get it done. So you deal
Yeah.
with division for the next 30 years as you gradually unwind this because it took 30 years of demographic change to make this happen. And the ubiquitousness of landslide election counties across America shows that. If that's correct, there is no fixing this quickly. It's you got to move back to Kentucky, even though you're a hardcore liberal, or you got to move back to San Francisco, even though you're hardcore conservative. Good luck getting people to do that. Good luck getting somebody who's scared and a liberal to move to a red state.
Yeah.
Good luck getting somebody who's in a red state person to move to a liberal state where they think we all run pedophile pizza rings. I mean, it's part of a joke, but I have conservative friends who literally think that.
Yeah.
They literally think that. They think that's what we're about and transgender operations for 12-year-old and 10-year-old kids and whatever they've heard,
Yeah.
right? And when you hear that, we're disgusting monsters.
Right.
So how are you going to talk with someone like that? And if you were going to do a more simpler thing, a lot of the professors will say interaction theory is the way to fix polarization. And what they're talking about is get out there and talk to a conservative if you're a liberal, or if you're a liberal, talk to a conservative. And some of them would have events in Philadelphia or Chicago, wherever they were, and they go, see, I got 30 conservatives to talk to 30 liberals in Chicago or Philadelphia. I can make it happen. That means nothing. So if you get liberals and Republicans in a landslide election district to talk, you're not actually doing anything. Those liberals already know to be more demure, or those were conservatives. You need to get liberals in a blue landslide county to talk to conservatives in a red landslide county. Now you're talking extremes. If you can get them to talk, we're having real networking. Most people aren't even doing that, and it's not even on their radar. They're saying, well, I got people in my same city to talk. That means nothing because your city is a landslide election county for either red or blue. You got to get a red and a blue to talk. I met two people out of 200 professors who were actually attempting to do that or aware of that issue.
Well, I'm happy to put some organizations on your radar. I think
Yeah.
Monty Guzman and Braver Angels is it has been going about a concerted, ongoing effort. Monty Guzman's book from 2 years ago, I never thought of it that way, is great. We work with the Village Square that's been doing it since 2006. Liz is just fantastic. And the logo they use is a flying pig. So when pigs fly, we'll get liberals and Democrats, and
Yeah,
conservatives together. But it
unfortunately, Monty Guzman's book kind of and the Better Angels are two of the groups that I'm well aware of. I've contacted, and they're making the same issue problems that I pointed out. No
oh, so
offense.
doing it in highly polarized areas and
So
one-offs, you
Monty
mean?
Guzman's is like, hey, we can have a conversation with a conservative if you explain it this way. That still plays out like I talked. If I'm in downtown San Francisco and I talk to a Republican in San Francisco, it is not the same as if I talk to a Republican in rural Kentucky. That Republican in San Francisco is going to have moderated their opinions on certain things. They can't say certain things. They're probably going to be less offended by LGBTQ and trans people because they're around them all the time, but then maybe they went more economics. That's wildly different than a Republican out of rural Kentucky. I know this because everybody said Mexicans vote the same. My cousins in Texas think nothing like my Mexican family here in California. We happen to be highly representative of the state we're in.
Yeah.
So if you're not getting people out of those counties and talking to a landslide district, you're not really making it happen. And neither of those groups are doing that to the best of my knowledge.
Well, so just to push back on that a little bit, there's
Sure.
one illustration that Monty shares in the book, and they do these events all the time where a busload of folks from her district, I think it's Seattle, went to a very 80% blue, went to a northern Oregon county, 80% red, and didn't just spend a day, but did it a number of times to get very, very blue constituents talking with very, very red constituents. One of my favorite brief stories from that event was there's a question that was if you want folks in the other from the other place who wear in the other colors to know one thing, what would you want them to know? And one of the folks from Northern Oregon, I guess was a Trump supporter, but he just picked up the sandwiches that they were eating, and he'd say, "I'd love for you to know how what's in my field gets to your plate." He picked up the sandwich,
Sure.
just like this sandwich.
Sure.
I'd love for you to get, and they got to know each other.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit more optimistic about those efforts than you are,
Well,
but
but that's within Oregon, and that's not what I was saying. So I was talking about they're still within an Oregon mindset. You would need to take the liberals from Oregon and then the conservatives from Kentucky. They're not doing that. They're still
mm,
on a local scale, and most of these people doing it are using logistics as the driver for their research. I simply can't drive 30 people or fly 30 people halfway through the country.
yeah,
I'm going to do something I can't. A bus, that still means you're within a localized district. That's the problem I'm talking about.
yeah,
We need to start getting people from wildly different backgrounds talking. The other thing is that there are as many professors who say encounter theory, which is what this is, does not work as there are professors who say that it does. So for every professor who says, if we just got people networking and I found the right way, I can find you a professor 1.5 who says that never works. They're looking at studies showing that if you're a conservative and I'm a liberal, maybe I get to know you, maybe I agree on a few points. Statistically, what happens though is when I go back to my neighborhood and I'm back around my neighbors, I end up voting the same way I've
right,
always voted at the next election. And when I'm asked about you, I just go, well, he's one of the good ones.
yeah,
So
right,
I psychologically take you out of liberals and I put you in the friend corner. But that doesn't mean that because I understand you, I've now changed my voting pattern. There's just as many professors saying that interaction theory has no determinative effect on long-term voting patterns, and they've done numerous studies to prove that. This is why I say hope. So for every professor that you got who says this is the problem and this is the solution, There's another professor who says that is not the problem, and here's hard evidence proving that's not the solution. I've heard a bunch of professors go, it's social media, it's social media, it's social media. Look at all these stats. Okay,
Yeah.
why are elderly the most polarized and they're not on social media? That puts a huge hole in that. Most of the professors who pursue a solution, I found interviewing them, have no idea of the critiques of their solution. They're
Yeah.
completely unaware. I've done 15 interviews where I'm like, what about this criticism? They're like, what? Everybody told me it was the best. You never talked to anybody who punched holes in this? I've done that literally with a couple of professors going, you say social media, how come the elderly aren't on it and they're the most divisive according to every poll? Explain that. And
Right.
you said this, but we have division going back to the 1990s, about 22 years before social media. So, and then when I explain that, they're going, oh, good points. I'll look into that.
So we need more work to be done to get better diagnoses so that we could come up with better prescriptions. I think that's
I
what you're
don't know if
saying.
it's possible to do that. I'm saying I've interviewed
I'm gonna
people.
hold out hope. I'm gonna hold
But
out
now you're
hope.
back to hope. But now you're back to, I heard this guy interviewed more professors from anywhere, listened to more interviews anywhere, and the best they got was, I hope it works. And your response is, I don't want to hear that. I want to think of hope. Great, man. Great.
I'm not gonna let you rain on my parade, man.
I'm not trying to rain on your parade. What I'm trying to do is tell
And I'll
people
still sign
that
this. I'll still sign the petition, by the way.
I appreciate that. I'm telling people this is kind of tired and done, but when Hitler was coming to power early on, he told everybody what he was going to do. A lot of people didn't believe him. I have a Jewish rabbi friend who pointed out, he was all, do you know the difference between Jewish people in America and Jewish people in Germany in 1935? I go, no, Rabbi, what's the difference? He goes, all the American Jews were the ones who knew horror's coming and got the hell out.
Hmm.
And the other Jews who thought, it's fine, come on, they're not going to do that, come on, relax, they're all dead.
Yeah, yeah, no, and my family is a testament to that. The
So,
Kleinfelds and the Merticks who got out of Romania and Poland and Germany, that they're the ones who ended up in Brooklyn. And that's why my mother came around, 1947, or even before that. My father's side of the family, the Kravals and the Blix, left what's now Cherny Ostrov, Ukraine. There are surviving cousins who stayed in Ukraine
sure.
and then USSR. But anyway,
Sure, of
yeah,
course, but you get the general idea.
I
There
get
were
the general
people who
idea.
saw what's going on and said, this is going to get bad. And then there were the rational people who said, come on, relax. You're being too radical. They're not
Yeah.
really going to do that. They've never done that. I hope that everything's going to be fine tomorrow. All those people who said that are dead,
Mm.
basically.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
ones who go, I see what you're saying. I believe you. There's a phrase in hip hop, believe someone when they tell you who they are.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
phrase, and those are the people who saw that. So this guy's saying, I'm going to be a dictator. I'm going to remove rights. He called Mexicans rapists. Then he said, I love the Eisenhower deportation plan, which is actually called Operation Wetback. Like I'm
Yeah.
supposed to believe he didn't know what that is. Then he picks a vice president who won his Ohio election because he ran a television commercial that said, do you hate Mexicans? This is the thing I tell Latin people. If you're not getting it, you're dumb.
Yeah.
You're all rapists. I want the wetback plan back. And I like the guy who said, I hate Mexicans, but there's nothing to see here and it's going to be totally fine.
Yeah. Believe him.
Jason Aldean in his press box when he was the nominee. Jason Aldean's the guy who did Try That in a Small Town, which is a country music video that features white people beating up on minorities. It was
Right.
also filmed in front of the last courthouse to hang a black man dead.
Hmm.
He says, oh, that's just an accident. I didn't know out of 1,000 courthouses, this is the one to hang a black man dead. By the way, he accidentally did blackface dressed up as Lil Wayne the year before. But we're supposed to believe that it's just an accident that he filmed this country music video about beating up on black people and minorities in front of the last courthouse to hang a black man. And just a coincidence that Donald Trump had him and his wife in his press box when he accepted the nomination. It's all there.
Yeah.
You're either going to pay attention or we're going to F around and find out.
Yeah. Well, there's certainly, I am not here to say that there's no reason to be concerned. So that's not, if that's not what I'm trying to say at all. Believe me, I am the first one to have grave concerns, even starting just in the five freedoms articulated in the First Amendment. And I don't think that's hyperbolic at all. So that's definitely not what I'm saying. By the way, I do want to correct something I said a little bit earlier. The Big Sort was written by Bill Bishop, released in
Yeah,
2009.
yeah.
It's called The Big Sort: Why the Clustering of the like-minded America is Tearing Us Apart. So I'll be sure to put that in the show notes.
But
A
if I
really
can
helpful
add,
book.
you mentioned Robert Putnam, and
Yeah.
Robert Putnam, I think he's the most famous sociologist in America, wrote an article 2 years ago. This is not getting any traction in the media, but he did, saying we're as divided as we were right after the Civil War. So the
Mm,
day after the Civil War ended and everybody's dead and 600,000 and they're still pissed off, we are as politically divided as that. Robert Putnam saying that. They're not
wow.
print media, but he has the data to show it.
So coincidentally, Professor Putnam was on one of the podcasts we did for the Village Square. So
Oh, I
it
love
all
listening to
comes
that
together,
guy.
man. All right, so
Man,
I'll
hook it
give you one
up.
chance to turn the tables on me. Do you have any questions for me?
I did, but you already answered him.
Okay.
When I asked you about LA and you were not unbiased and showed how you felt as a Californian and basically emotionally showed that no, it's not okay for a president to say, I don't really like you guys. I don't see you as fellow Americans. Go ahead and be burned alive and homeless. Yeah, I know, you got to be moderate with what you say here, but the fact that you showed that emotive response, you're on board with everything we're saying already, brother.
Yeah. Yeah.
Welcome on board.
You got it. You got it. So important. How can we follow you, find more information about the initiative, perhaps even sign the petition, and learn about all the great work that you're doing?
CalExitNow.org, 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 CalExitNow.org. There's going to be a button saying sign the petition. It's going to ask for your email. When you put that email in, you will get an email response automatically with the petition. And I can answer any questions. So CalExitNow.org, fill out the email. We'll get you that petition within minutes.
Great.
Or you can email and call me personally. My email and phone number out there. Marc.ruiz.evans@gmail, 415-595-3394. That's on the initiative, so I can't keep it private. So
Yeah, that's how I got in touch with you. I read the
yeah,
initiative and
yeah.
and that's how we got in touch. So that was
Yeah.
great. Now we did cover a lot, but is there anything important we haven't discussed that you'd like to add before we close it up?
Um, it would be nice if the media and the California public could start asking why legal experts say secession's illegal and then accidentally forgot to mention the four basic points that I made. I'm still being told, you're kind of crazy, secession's illegal. And I go, how come they can't mention those four basic points and yet I'm still crazy? It'd be nice for people to see through that and start asking some questions. Maybe ask those experts. You said X. Can you acknowledge these 4 points and then tell me how they don't matter? Because none of them are doing that. I think that's called pulling a fast one. And I don't think that's fair to the California mind. And it would be nice if California started asking questions about that.
Fair enough, man. I really appreciate you taking the time, spelling this all out for us. The historical context is really important, and especially understanding this process as well as the alternative of just calling your state
Absolutely.
legislators. So this has really been great, and it's great to get to know you. I'm interested to follow you and see how this process goes. And yeah, thanks for doing this.
I'm on YouTube. We do YouTube shows all the time. Marc Ruiz Evans. It's also linked through the site, CalExit Now. Please email me a link to the show, sir. We will share it with thousands of Californians. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Absolutely. As soon as it goes up, as soon as the episode drops, I'll be sure to send you those links. And yeah, this was great. Really, really appreciate it.
Okay.
And as always, if you dig what we're doing here, remember to follow the show, write that review, and now you can watch these conversations on YouTube and support us on Patreon. The YouTube is youtube.com/@politicsandreligion. Your support really does make a difference, so thank you for all of it. Now go talk some politics and religion with gentleness and respect. Have a great week.